Hey, Dr. Jon Finn here. Welcome to the Habit Mechanic podcast. Right now, you can get my new best-selling book, Train Your Brain for the AI Revolution, at tougherminds.co.uk. The digital book, audiobook, and physical book are all available at a special price that you won't find anywhere else.
Hello once again, it's another Tougher Minds podcast, and I'm joined once again by Tougher Minds founder and managing director, Dr. Jon Finn. Jon, hello there. Another couple of interesting articles in the media this week for us to react to, specifically around the area of young people's mental health and well-being, and exam stress, again, rears its head, which perhaps is an indication it's not going to go away, as you often say. And that's also connected to young people's well-being as well. We'll come on to the exam stress issue a bit later on in the podcast, but certainly the first of the two articles that caught my eye, one of them was in The Independent, headline, New Child Mental Health Support Service Launched, and it quoted another study which estimated that there are 3 children suffering from a mental health issue in every school classroom in the UK, a pretty alarming statistic by anybody's standards, and regardless of your perspective, I'm sure that's not a positive stat. They cite school pressures and lifestyle as well, I think, in part of the article as being the causal factors. We're going to get onto that shortly. I think it's worth bearing it in mind for people and for you to point out, is it not, that whatever you would say about this, you'd never seek to take the place of an appropriate sort of response to these sort of issues by, let's call them generically, clinicians and medical people? To
an extent, Andrew, but all these things are on a continuum. The definition of what a mental illness is on a continuum, and it's the broad description we describe for child mental illness is CAMS, and it's often hard to diagnose specific things. So I think we have to understand that psychology is bastardized. It's all drawing from the same understanding. So although I would never claim that I could have the insight to work with a schizophrenic patient, I understand the interventions they use and why they work.
Yeah.
But I think that often, mental illness is not a clinical condition. People are not on medication for it in the way we're describing it in this particular survey. So there is validity in using, cognitive behavioural therapy, as we do, and as actually seems to be increasingly potent in helping people with quite severe mental illnesses like schizophrenia to get better and get more control over what are ultimately unhelpful thinking habits. Now, sometimes there is no control over those habits or those thinking patterns, but ultimately the interventions are trying to help people to grasp more control. Working in professional sport, we see a lot of mental health illnesses. I think we're seeing that come out of the GB cycling thing right now. It's not easy to be a world-class professional athlete. And I think at the moment, there's some deluded people about what those top athletes need to do in order to win gold medals. Now, I'm not suggesting it needs to be sexist and it needs to be unpleasant language and unpleasant anecdotes about groups of people in society, but it's real hard work and it pushes people to the edge. And that's why Dr. Steve Peters' his work has been so helpful to lots of real world-class athletes like Ronnie O'Sullivan, Victoria Pendleton. These guys they're suffering with problems on the mental illness scale, and they really struggle to control the thinking. So hopefully that's a summary of where I think I can contribute to this discussion.
Yeah, and it's probably worth pointing out as well, obviously, that both, I think, Victoria Pendleton and Ronnie O'Sullivan are, have made their own references to their own particular problematic moments and issues they've had. So that's certainly in the public domain for anybody to read back on and have a look at. And happily, both of those individuals are being very successful in their chosen field and in their new field. In Victoria Pendleton's case, if you're a follower of national hunt racing recently, you might have seen her excelling there as well. So, you spoke about the type of interventions that Tougher Minds gets involved with, and in this piece in the Independent, one of the lines is that clinicians, as we've called them, and as they're generically referred to, do say very clearly that an early intervention is ideal. And I think it's fair to say, to characterise how you would come at it, something like Tougher Minds can act as a preventative measure, and as we all know, prevention is better than cure.
Yeah. So the work that we deliver is based on cognitive behavioural therapy, which is certainly a cornerstone of how I was taught about psychological intervention. It's a dominant sort of theory used within sports psychology literature. And what I understand of the literature, CBT is increasingly used and often being used in conjunction and actually replacing medical interventions because it's powerful. And our understanding of the brain has extended that, because we know that humans run on habits. Most of what we do is a habit. Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, won a Nobel Peace Prize for that work. We are cognitive misers. We don't rationally think about what we do. We want to predict the future quickly. And we really struggle to stop the limbic regions of our brain making automatic decisions. So what CBT is allowing to do is quite literal for people to rewire their brain, and look at the emotional regulation literature within coming out of some of the American labs, big hitting universities, big hitting professors, showing that the sites in the brain which are responsible for rational thinking control can be strengthened like muscles can if we practice. I guess mindfulness to an extent has been the zeitgeist here, but I think CBT probably trumps all when it comes to helping people to get a control and to build better thinking habits. Whether that's what you say to yourself when you make a mistake, what you say to yourself about your body image, how you manage to refocus your concentration in class, whatever it is.
So your advice then, I suppose, to this new support service which is being launched would be to include those sort of approaches, and perhaps tell us a bit more about how exactly they might be implemented with young people at school.
Well, here's the problem. Teachers are not trained to be cognitive behavioural psychologists, but yeah, that is a lot of their job, because they're trying to help young people to build better study habits and become better life skills, if you like. Teachers are going into their industry because they're passionate about their subjects. And although they can make good inroads into helping young people, they're not experts. They haven't trained explicitly in that background. Schools have counselling services. As you know, we have programs in state and the private sector. Certainly, all the private schools I've worked in have had good counselling services available. But I think there's a problem, Andrew, and I think the problem lies in knowledge about my mental illness is not enough. This website presents knowledge. If we were going to teach someone how to drive a car, would we just put on the website some explicit instructions of how to drive a car? We wouldn't. We have to do driving lessons until we can build up enough skill and habit. And I'm going from a continuum here, from knowledge at the bottom, moving up to skill, and then eventually habit, so we can pass a test and we can be safe on the road. I do not see very minimally, I do not see very coherent and efficient and effective skills being taught to young people that are going to help them to overcome, I think, a lot of the mental illnesses that are being flagged up. They're not being taught the skills. Now, these skills are skills for life, and they are fundamental to everything that we do in life, and yet we are not teaching young people. So I'm not greatly reassured that a website full of information is going to resolve this crisis. And what's very clear to me is that what parents are crying out for is not just some knowledge, they want some skills, they want some things that they can do with their children to actually help them to manage themselves more effectively. So it might sound like I have a little bit of a bee in my bonnet here, but I do. I genuinely, it dismays me.
Well, I mean, I'm going to say you have just come through a period of events where you've worked with parents, as well as the schools that you have partnerships and relationships with at Tougher Minds. You've just done a series of events in central London, the Improve Exam Success event, and another event dedicated to both exams and school transitions. And you've been able to discuss some of those issues with parents. So you were speaking from direct contact and experience there, I guess.
Yeah, and beyond that, parents then invite us into their home to work with the families over extended periods of time, because they get that to change what you do and build new habits, that you need more than knowledge. You need the skills, and you've got to practice the skills to the point where they become a habit. From a mental illness perspective, we're talking about thinking habits, not necessarily physical habits, but not that they're not connected. I just think it's a crying shame we're not giving, a better understanding of this to young people. Carol Dweck's work, Growth Mindset, which is completely connected to mental health. The idea that if I fail, it's okay, I can keep persisting, I can keep going, I'll get there eventually. It's worked its way into education, but just understanding a growth mindset is good is not enough. We need, secondary to that, is triggers to remind people that if they keep practicing, they get better, or they can change themselves. And then finally, and most importantly, young people need skills to manage themselves. They need skills to be resilient. We do not explicitly teach those skills. And it's interesting speaking to schools who say they do that, and you speak to their pupils and you say, okay, well, can you tell me about the programs? They say, yeah, we study resilience, and they give you a definition of resilience. And then you say, okay, well, how do you manage a challenge then when it comes up? And it's silence, because they don't know. So we're not really teaching the skills in an adequate way that can actually help these young people to manage themselves more effectively. We're running some pilot projects at the moment, Year 7 transitions. So if we're talking about nipping this in the bud early, Year 7 is a great place. You go into a new school generally, and you start to form new habits. The mindset of a lot of these children is they've got what they've got. I am good at maths, or I am not good at maths. Yeah, education will tell you it's growth mindset. It isn't, because every system in education will labels you and how good you are, because it's a measurement system. Now, we've got to measure people. I get that, but I think that we could do it a lot more efficiently, a lot more effectively, and we could start to see this epidemic of mental health problems being resolved. I think we're often trying to deal with the problem when the horse has already bolted. We can close the stable door here, and we can really help these young people to get better, what we call personal change management. And these are life transforming skills, which I think tick every box that we want education to be. Sorry, I feel like I'm ranting there a little bit.
Not at all. I think it's very interesting, and it is based very much on your experience. I was going to say one final thing on this particular strand of the podcast as we come to the conclusion of our discussion of this specific article. As well as well-being, I think you would. It's fair to say, isn't it? You would, and I know you come at it. I know you've just spoken with great conviction just now about the fact that this is helpful for well-being, but there's a dividend academically as well. Young people improve in their academic performance as a consequence. Is that fair to say?
It's another problem within how we dichotomise understanding and education. The pastoral system shouldn't be disconnected to the academic system. Young people are in the middle of this melee of things going on, and the most meaningful thing in their life should be their academic work, because that's what they spend most of their time engaged in. I go to typically 6 periods a day, times 5. So we need to make their academic work meaningful to them. And very often it's not, or it's too meaningful. And either end can cause problems. So often it's sensible to couch the development of new skills initially in an academic context, because that's the thing that young people practice the most. So yeah, that's another bugbear to an extent, that those things are separated out. It's been very clear for a very long time, before we had any brain scanning technology, that living a meaningful life seems to be very important to human beings, being happy, healthy, high performing. New data from neuroscience seems to be confirming those ideas. And for young people, if their education is very meaningful to them, then that's very healthy. So yeah, those things are disconnected in my opinion. And, not in my opinion, in fact, in my experience of deploying these programs in education in the UK across all kinds of different contexts.
Yeah, I was going to say, to conclude, you certainly have amassed significant testimony on the Tougher Minds website, with people really extolling the virtues of Tougher Minds programs and the benefits it's brought them, which is pleasing to see by anybody's standards. And there's some great personal anecdotes on there, it is a happy experience to take some of those in and just see how some people have been helped. While we're on the subject of the Tougher Minds website, we'd certainly encourage people to go on and have a look. There's free resources to download. On the homepage, you'll see them in the top right-hand corner. One of those free resources is a free ebook called The Elite Business Athlete. Plenty of great performance tips in there, and insight as well around similar things that you've just spoken about. Jon, just give us a brief overview of what people will get if they do download the Elite Business Athlete.
Well, they'll get, first and foremost, an overview of how their brain functions and why that typical functioning makes being happy, healthy and high performing challenging. And then what we've done is we've used some case studies from the world of elite sport. But these aren't just necessarily athletes. There's certainly a mother in there. These people they're not just athletes, they're people, and sort of using, I guess, their explanations of how they've managed to excel in their own lives, and trying to present those to the reader in a simple and practical way that they can start to practice in their life. Again, it's a knowledge-based document. But it gives you some inklings of some real concrete skills that you can start to use and practice, and hopefully build into habits. Yeah,
it's a very engaging read as well, with some great case studies of some people I'm sure you will have heard of. Jessica Ennis, the New Zealand All Blacks rugby team, etc. So well worth checking out. The Elite Business Athlete, available on tougherminds.co.uk. So I would encourage people to go onto the website and check that out. Well, the second article, then, Jon, that we're going to discuss was in the Telegraph earlier this week, and touching on something we discussed in greater detail in previous podcasts, but nevertheless I think worth repeating given this fairly stark headline, which read, "Leave us alone, teens plea to parents suffering from exam stress." The top line, Britain's stressed out teenagers just want their parents to leave them alone during exam time, according to a new report. And it shows that exam stress will affect 8 in 10 teens, their behaviour and their health and their appearance even this summer. Perhaps that doesn't surprise you, given what you've just explained to us and the experiences you've had. But the study warns that parents can also be a key distraction or even a frustration, with many teens pleading to be left alone to revise. Now, that rather dysfunctional, problematic picture painted there is potentially worrying for people and troubling, but I think it's worthwhile repeating the positive experiences you've had with working with parents and families, and I suppose the phrase would be, it doesn't have to be that way.
No, it doesn't have to be that way. And why would parents be experts in helping teenagers manage exam stress? I think there would be a continuum of reasons why teenagers don't want their parents to interfere. At one end of the continuum, it would be, I've got this sorted, I'm good at exams, I've got a good academic background, I'm confident, you're just getting in my way. The other end would be, stop badgering me to do work, I don't want to do any work, and everything in between. But what we've seen is that if you give parents and teenagers a shared understanding of how to manage stress and how to manage stress in relation to exams, and this becomes a family philosophy, that is extremely powerful. Unfortunately, again, based on my experience and based on some very, very top schools openly saying we do not do this, actually we don't prepare our children or our parents in the explicit way that you're talking about, Tougher Minds, for example. It doesn't appear to me that this goes on in schools, that we have ultimately 10 to 12 subjects we're probably sitting, and we have a lot of time focused on those individual subjects, but no one's teaching us how to manage ourselves and keep metaphorically keeping all the plates spinning at the same time. And of course, for a lot of teenagers who, a time in your life when you suffer more than ever from the need for short-term gratification and the need to do what your peers are doing, then they've left their revision too late, which is adding an extra level of stress, which isn't really captured in this article, is it? The idea that teenagers have left revision too late and therefore they're going to be stressed out. That's not education's fault necessarily. It's a human problem. But what we're seeing is that with good education, and again moving from knowledge to skill to habit, there's some real big impact in not only helping teenagers to deal with stress, but getting better academic results at the other end. We increasingly have data from our programs that seem to show if you teach children these kind of strategies and their parents, they tend to get around a half a grade improvement in all their subjects on average compared to their peers who weren't taught these skills. We've seen that now over the past 5 years in sets of data from different schools. It's not a randomised control trial, I'm not suggesting that it is, but other sources of data, parents saying, I can't believe it, he's a changed boy. She's now dealing with the stress and the pressure so much better. Children saying, without those strategies, I would not have dealt with my exams anywhere near as much, and I don't think I'd have got the results I would have got. That's strong testimony to point you in the direction. If you start to explicitly teach young people this stuff, then those numbers will be coming down. And actually, I think for me, the idea of, we shouldn't stress them out with the exams, or there's too much pressure on them. The reality is life is full of pressure, and what we want to do is help young people to be very good at dealing with pressure and stress. And the two stories we're talking about here are completely interconnected. And where we're falling short is we are not teaching young people a set of life skills that they can use to manage any challenge in their life, any problem that they have. We were at JP Morgan yesterday in Canary Wharf, in the old Lehman Brothers building in the auditorium there. I think we had about nearly 200 parent professionals tapped in, either in the auditorium or webcast from as far as America. They were plugged in, wanting to learn how do they help their children. These are successful people, but they recognise, if you're working at JP Morgan, it's suggested you're a successful person. They've recognised that although they might have an understanding of how they could manage these challenges, it might not be transferable directly to their children. They might not be able to explain it and upskill them in the way that they've learned to do it. So what they're looking for is a a generic framework that they can use, and they can use to help their children get the cope, effectively with any challenge that they have in life.
Yeah, and it's perhaps worth pointing out there is a specific passage in the Telegraph article, which I think is worth picking up on. You talk about how you can work with parents successfully, because this, which is a good counterpoint to this piece in the article, which talks about a study which cites a detrimental action parents could take. It would be to confiscate technology and micromanage revision. Well, I think it's fair to say, from what I understand of the Tougher Minds programs, you have when you have successfully worked with families collectively, it's not seen in those sort of adversarial, dysfunctional terms, and the reality is that young people are opting to ignore technology and manage their own revision.
Sure, yeah. I think it was the boy last week, wasn't there, reporting how he'd put his PlayStation away in the loft. I've heard of children giving their parents the remote controls as they're going out the house to work in the morning to put in the boot of their car, or mobile phones. So children taking that decision themselves. And this is it's a human problem again. What do parents want? Excuse me. They want fast change. People don't change their behaviour quickly. We understand that, because again, it's about building habits. And people don't like to change when they feel like they're being coerced. So the strategies we might use to extend good revision practice in the home have to be a negotiation, and they have to be more self-determining than coercive, because we're more likely to change if we are self-determined. And I had a conversation with a parent yesterday, actually, at JP Morgan, and kind of saying, and actually we're doing some other work at the moment overseas, and similar thing that the parent, they want that I will set the goals for them. It's like, no, that's not how you do it. You've got to empower the person who you want the change to happen to do it themselves. And because that takes time, it's not very brain friendly, but that's the reality. If you want change to happen, you have to do it over a period of time. The reality is, the bad revision habits, the bad thinking habits that seem to be causing lots of problems for young people in the UK, and I'm sure further afield, certainly in the Western world, they're not developed quickly. They're developed over a significant period of time. So if we're going to change those habits, we have to respect that it takes time. And, the myth that you build a new habit in 21 days is nonsense. Habits are very complicated. They're interconnected. You can't always put a time frame on it. But I think we've seen that sort of six-week interventions seem to have a good impact, which kind of accumulates to around 9 hours of practice over a period of time, if there's something meaningful to work towards. So if you give GCSE students, let's say you started to work with them before after the February half term, then that's a good period of time to build the good habits into the Easter revision period, for example. So we are starting to get some a handle on how long it takes to change, but the reality is it takes time, and you can't force someone to change their behaviour. And you've got to feel sorry for the parents, really. They're trying to help because they care. And I think lots of parents say you'll never understand how much you love your child till you have one, and they want to do the best for their children, but they just don't have the skills and the strategies. And it's just, we spend our lives at school getting taught knowledge and information, sometimes skills about about the world, which is fantastic, but no one ever teaches us how to manage ourselves. There's a chap who's an educational consultant, part of a conference I was at, saying, when I was at school, and I went to a good school, I learnt about the Tudors 4 times, and nobody ever taught me how to concentrate properly in class. And what we're seeing is, when you do start to teach children how to concentrate properly, or how to regulate their confidence levels, it has a serious impact.
Well, I think that's a great point at which to conclude this week's discussion, Jon. Thanks for your time once again. Interesting, certainly in the media's coverage of these important issues within the education system. It's worth repeating then, The Independent talking this week about a new child mental health support service being launched, and a survey showing in the Telegraph that young people sometimes not having the most productive relationship with their parents during exam time. But Tougher Minds has great experience and now significant testimony about how it can work successfully to address those important issues. Thanks once again, as I say, Jon, for your time. Anybody interested in learning more about Tougher Minds' work and downloading some free resources available should head to the Tougher Minds website. That's tougherminds.co.uk. You can also follow Tougher Minds on Twitter. The handle is @TougherMinds. Thanks for listening, and listen out for another podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Habit Mechanic podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe and tell someone else about one of the ideas or insights that you found most interesting.